Okay. So I believe we discussed a few things last week about after the war, after Duryodhana dies, after Ashwatthama's cursed by Krishna, kind of cursed, uh, and Vyasa, the women of Hastinapur, they are in grief, they're distraught. Gandhari, uh, sorry, I think Dhritarashtra, he is still angry with Bhima. Krishna saves him by putting a statue in front of Dhritarashtra, which Dhritarashtra crushes, and he lets go of his anger after that. Gandhari, who's in the midst of all the grieving women, she is quite sad, about to curse the Pandavas when Vedvyasa stops her, but then she ends up cursing Krishna. So I think after that, the last rites of the Kaurava army is conducted. Yudhishthira does all of that. After all, the war, Yudhishthira is quite distraught. He blames himself for the destruction of all the Kshatriyas, all the kings, all the soldiers. So he kind of blames himself for it. He is kind of in depression. So here this is where the Shanti Parva comes in, where a lot of advice is thrown in Yudhishthira's way. And when he finally confronts that situation and he realizes that he has to now lead the kingdom, he takes on that leadership role and starts ruling the country. He gives a lot of responsibility to the others, and they move on. Now, here what happens is Yudhishthira's, while he's managing the kingdom, he's obviously doing it after a lot of persuasion by a lot of people, including Bhishma. So that was one of the biggest chapters. Here, now that he starts managing the kingdom, he's taken permission of Dhritarashtra and given Duryodhana's room to Bhishma, he's given Dushasana's room to Arjuna, and so on. Everyone has their own rooms. Krishna and Satyaki are boarding with Arjuna during this stay. There are some things that Yudhishthira is still not completely over. So Krishna suggests that they meet Bhishma. The entire Pandavas, the group, there's a lot of other kings like Satyaki, a lot of rishis that go and visit Bhishma along with Yudhishthira and Krishna. And Krishna suggests to Bhishma that he should talk to Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira has a lot of questions. Bhishma says he cannot help because his health is deteriorating and he cannot, in all clarity, provide advice to Yudhishthira. So here Yudhishthira Lord Krishna helps Bhishma. Bhishma kind of gets a new lease of energy with which he has more clarity. But here again, Bhishma says, why do you want me to tell you, Krishna? You are the one who has all this knowledge. You should be really imparting it to Yudhishthira. So then Krishna tells Bhishma, I know, but you are someone who's amassed this knowledge over a long period. You are the elder in the family. It is your right to give this advice, give the education that Yudhishthira needs. So please uh, uh, accept his request and give him all the advice and guidance that he needs. So finally, Bhishma relents. He gives the advice to Yudhishthira about a number of topics. There's a huge number of topics. So I won't go through all of that, but a huge number of topics are covered. And finally, Bhishma says, I've given you everything I know, Yudhishthira. I'm ready to move on. So here, something amazing happens. Bhishma is ready to die. And I think it's the 58th day after the war or something like that. Bhishma's, when he decides he's ready to give up his life, in a matter of seconds, all the wounds in his body he has healed. There's all the gods and rishis from the sky, they're looking on. And as he closes his eyes, the energy from his body leaves from his crown, from the top of his head, and it goes into the skies. And the flowers start raining on the body of Bhishma. Yudhishthira is again very sad. Uh, Bhishma has been a big part of Yudhishthira's and the Pandavas' life. So Yudhishthira is a little sad, but then they have to perform the last rites. So along with the Pandavas, along with Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadeva, Yudhishthira performs the last rites. There's also Yuyutsu, Satyaki, and all of them. All of them pay their last respects, and his body is burnt as per the rituals of the time. After this ritual, then all those present there want to offer water. It's another ritual. It's a part of another ritual where they have to offer water to the ancestors. When when they have to do that, they are actually at the banks of the river Ganga, right? So they're going to the river Ganga, and when this happens, goddess Ganga herself comes out of the river, and she's quite upset about Bhishma's death. Here, she starts telling how he was killed, unfortunately, because of Shikandi, and that it shouldn't have happened that way. She's grieving and crying. So then Krishna consoles her, and he says, "Look, Shikandi wasn't the one who killed Bhishma, but it was Arjuna," and he explains the circumstances. Finally, he convinces Ganga to calm down, and he also tells that the way Krishna puts, Ganga, you're really pure, all right? Your son is equally pure. So don't grieve for him. He is now in a better place, and you will get to see him in that place. So don't grieve for him. So she's finally consoled, and she leaves the place. So that is the end of Anushashana Parva. It's one of the biggest books up after Shanti Parva, but I've just given you a gist of what happens there. Now that uh, Bhishma is cremated and the last rites are complete, they all go back to the kingdom. Now, what's happened is after the Kurukshetra war, there's a number of little kingdoms here and there. It's scattered. There's a lot of uneasiness as to what's going on. So Krishna suggests to Yudhishthira, look, you need to perform some yajnas. One of them is Ashwamedha yajna. Now, as a part of the yajna, you have to send a horse which will roam around the earth, and wherever the horse goes, that becomes a part of your empire. It is like the Rajasuya Yajna, but a little different. This is reliant on where the horse travels. So when Krishna proposes this, Vedvyasa is also there. Yudhishthira says that's a really nice idea. It will give all the kingdoms in the country some direction. So why not do it? But the problem is a yajna costs a lot. You have to give a lot of donations. You have to invite a lot of priests. You have to invite all these kings, kingdoms, everyone for this ritual. But after this Kurukshetra war, our treasury is pretty much empty. We don't really have any money for it or any wealth for it. So then Ved Vyasa here steps in and he says, look, in the past, a long time ago, there was a king by the name Maruta. He wanted to conduct a yajna, a great yajna himself. He was a great king, one of the greatest kings of his time. His ancestors had a priest by the name Brihaspati. Now, Brihaspati, I don't know how many of you know, but he's actually originally the priest of the Devas, the guru of the Devas. But for a brief period, he's on earth and he's the priest of Muruta's ancestors, his father, grandfather, and so on. So Muruta now decides to conduct a huge yajna with which he will go to heaven. And Indra comes to know about this and he doesn't want Muruta to perform this yajna. So what he does is he goes and talks to Brihaspati even before Muruta approaches him. And he convinces Brihaspati to join him in the Devloka, in the kingdom of Indra, and start doing some rituals for the Devas. And Brihaspati agrees to it. Murutta, by the time he gets to Brihaspati, Brihaspati says, look, I've already agreed to Indra and I cannot be a priest for both the Devas and you. So I will have to be with Indra and help him out with his rituals, his requests. Then Murutta is actually quite distressed. He doesn't know what to do, how to handle things. And he comes back to his palace. Here, Narada approaches him, Rishi Narada. And he says, look, I know you want to do this yajna. How about you approach Brihaspati's brother, Samvarta? The thing is, Samvarta is a very difficult saint to please, so you will have to put in a lot of hard yards. Murutta agrees and he goes. And there's a lot of things that Murutta has to do before he can please Samvarta. Samvarta is quite an angry person too. So he says, okay, I will come and do, but you have to be loyal to me. Murutta says, I am loyal to you. I will do everything you want me to. So it's agreed. Samvarta finally agrees to do the yajna. Now here Brihaspati comes to know that Samvarta is doing a yajna. And the greatness of that yajna, Brihaspati feels like he's left out of it. So he speaks to Indra about it. So Indra tries to dissuade Murutta from doing that yajna first. That does not happen. So then what he does is he tells, okay, how about you get Brihaspati to do the yajna? Murutta does not agree to that either. He says, I am loyal to Samartha. I will only get Samartha to do this. So then he sends Agni and then he sends Gandharvas, etc. to try either negotiate or intimidate him to get Brihaspati to do the yajna for him. None of that works because Samvarta is quietly helping Murutta. Okay, so finally, Samartha is so powerful, he finally gets even Indra on board. Indra finally attends the yajna and it's a successful yajna. In this yajna, Murutta actually distributes a lot of wealth. An unimaginable amount of wealth is distributed to Brahmanas and to all the people that come there, all the gods and all that. But the thing is, after this yajna, a lot of those Brahmanas, etc., they take what they want. They're given a lot more than what they need, so they leave a lot behind and go. So there's still a huge treasure in one of the mountains in Himalayas. So what Vedyasa tells Yudhishthira is, you need to go and get that treasure. But before you do, you need to please the mountain and the devas over there. Yudhishthira and the Pandavas acknowledge this, and they decide to go for it. They take leave. Here, Krishna leaves for Dwaraka. Now, while the Pandavas go there and they start pleasing the gods, they get permission to dig the treasure out. They also announce that they're going to conduct, now that they have access to the treasure, they can actually start the yajna. So they start announcing to their close friends who are in Hastinapur, and also a message is sent to Dwaraka for Krishna to come back, for the yajna to start. While all this is happening, here Uttara is pregnant. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but Uttara was pregnant during the war. Uttara is Abhimanyu's wife. She was pregnant during the war, and when Ashwatthama releases that Brahmashira weapon, he wants to kill the Pandavas, but he cannot do that. He redirects that to Uttara's womb, where the child is just a fetus. It's still a fetus. And Krishna then gets angry and curses him there, saying for 3,000 years you're going to be without any company, you're going to be diseased, etc. So around that time, Krishna protects the fetus in the womb. Now, here what happens is when Uttara's child is born, while the Pandavas are away, the child is born dead. Krishna, as soon as he enters, Kunti is here lamenting. She's crying and she's telling Krishna what's happened. Now, when Krishna leaves for Dwaraka the first time, after Bhishma's death, he takes Subhadra and goes. She also comes back with Krishna. Subhadra goes to visit her parents and all that, and they come back. So Subhadra hears that and she faints for a second. Then she gets up and she says, "Oh Krishna, you said you promised to take care of, promised to help Uttara's child, and it's born dead. You need to really help." So they all immediately go towards Uttara's chamber. Uttara is quite distraught. She's grieving for the child. She doesn't know what to do. She gets up as soon as she sees Krishna, and she comes and falls down on the floor and she starts crying and she says, "Oh Krishna, look, you promised that my child will be all right, but he's born dead." So immediately Krishna says, "Don't worry. As long as I'm there, everything will be fine." So he goes and he caresses the child just on the head a little bit, and it starts making noise. It starts moving. All of them are shocked over there. They're surprised. Now, Parikshit, so the boy is named Parikshit, and because Pariksha is a test, okay? After the war, everyone's tested. So he's born after that. So that is why he's called Parikshit. Okay, Krishna said, "Don't worry. He will be a healthy child. He will rule the entire world for 60 years. So you guys don't worry about it." So everyone's now happy and they're celebrating. Okay. Now what happens is the Pandavas have returned. They hear the good news. They're also very happy. They're celebrating. And now the yajna starts. They invite all these brahmanas and they want to do give the donations, etc. And they start the yajna. Now, of course, before they start the yajna, one of the rituals is welcoming all the elders, Kripacharya, all this. Krishna, they pray to Krishna with Kripacharya and others. And another part of the yajna is also where they remember the ancestors who have passed away. So it's called the Pitru Paksha. There's a little ceremony that I think even today people do, a lot of people do, where the ancestors are remembered and they're offered food, etc. As the first part of the yajna concludes, they have to release a horse. Now, as that is happening, they happen to notice a mongoose that starts walking around where the food is thrown. A little bit of food is thrown. And this mongoose has half of its body covered in gold. And it starts looking for food and it starts eating some of the food. And then it turns to the Pandavas and everyone that's there, the rishis and others, Brahmanas, and it says, "This is not a great yajna at all." And the rishis and all are surprised. And they say, Yudhishthira has done everything by the book. He's done, he's performed the rituals by inviting everyone. He's given all the dakshina. He's done everything by the book. Why are you saying that? So then the mongoose says, "Okay, I don't mean to offend anybody, but the truth is, I've had food uh, in the past which has converted half my body into gold, and I was waiting for another half of my body, the other half of my body to turn into gold. And this happened a long time ago, where there was a poor Brahmana who did not have money to even feed his family. I got some food of his hut, his outside his hut, and that's when it turned gold. So his yajna is more powerful than yours." So these saints are quite confused. They're saying, "Well, how can you perform a yajna without any money? How can you do those things?" So then the mongoose explains. The ritual conducted by that Brahmana was in his heart. He would, because he did not have any money, he would conduct it in his heart. Now, the Brahmana was so poor that there were most days that he would not eat at night. That Brahmana, he was accompanied by his wife, his son, and his daughter-in-law. They were very poor. During one season, there was famine. Right? There's no food anywhere. For a few days, they went without food. Finally, when they got a little bit of food, which is a little bit of barley, the Brahmana divided that into four for himself, his wife, his daughter, his son, and his daughter-in-law. And just as they were about to eat, they were very hungry, but just as they were about to eat, a Brahmana knocks on the door of their hut. And he says, "I'm really hungry. Can you feed me?" This poor Brahmana, he sees the uh, uh, saint who's the other saint, the other Brahmana who's outside, and he offers him his food. That Brahmana is actually seated and he's given his food. He eats it and he says, the visitor says, "Oh, I've had this food, but it's not enough for me." Without thinking, the wife of the Brahmana offers her food to the visitor. The Brahmana says, "Oh," he tells his wife, I'm your husband. I'm, I won't say no to you, but I'm supposed to look after you. How can I let you give your food to the visitor?" So then the wife says, "Look, I'm equally responsible for the household. So let me give my share of food to the visitor." So the visitor eats that and he says, "I am still hungry." So then immediately the son gets up and he gives his share of food to the visitor. Then again, there's a conversation between the Brahmana and his son. And the Brahmana says, "You're young, I'm supposed to look after you." The son says, "Look, I have got my samskaras from you. I have to do this as your son. Only then we will uh, uh, have a better life in the next life." So that moves on. And then the visitor who eats that food is still hungry. Then the daughter-in-law also is very kind. She also comes and gives. And then the Brahman stops her immediately and says, "You are my daughter-in-law. How can I let you go hungry? You are very soon you're going to have kids with my son. You can't be without food." She says, "No, no. My husband will look after me. You don't worry about me. it is my duty to feed our visitor, and she gives that visitor her food. Now the visitor has that food also, and then immediately he transforms himself into Yamadharmaraya. Yamadharmaraya is Yudhishthira's father, the god of death. So he is very pleased with the Brahmana and the family, and he says, "You've been performing yagna without any wealth, without anything. You've been performing the rituals, etc., with whatever little you could, and I'm very pleased with you. What you have done is unimaginable, and I'm very pleased with you." So what he does is he says, "Look, there's a chariot that comes from the sky, and it says, get into the chariot. All the four of you are going with your bodies into heaven. You can enjoy Swargaloka with that." So that's how they go. And the Mangu says, "I was there when this event was happening, and there was a little bit of food that was fallen on the floor. I had a little bit of that food, and that's why half of my body turned into gold. But right now I'm eating the food that you have here, and I'm not nothing is happening to me. Now you see why this Brahmana, poor Brahmana, his yajna was better than yours." And then he vanishes from there. Uh, while all the Brahmanas are surprised and shocked, there is no comment. Everybody starts moving on. Okay. Here the horse is now released, and Arjuna is. Uh, I'll finish this quickly. This chapter quickly. So Arjuna follows the horse now everywhere. He's like I said in the last lesson. He's in charge of the strategic uh, uh, aspects of the military. So he follows the horse with a little army. Wherever the horse goes, that part of the kingdom belongs to the empire now. So as he goes along, he comes across Trigarthas, Bhagadatta's son, Jarasandha's son. Now all these people are descendants of the Kaurava warriors in the battlefield who died in the battlefield, and they still despise the Pandavas, and they challenge Arjuna. One after another, Arjuna challenges them in every kingdom, and he wins them. He does not kill them. In fact, he defeats them and he invites them for the yagna at the end, for the horse sacrifice. So he keeps going like that, and then he comes to a place called Manipur. This is where, if you remember, in one of Arjuna's travels, he marries Chitrangada. First, he gets together with Ulupi, and then he marries Chitrangada. Now, both of them are like his wives. So he comes to Manipur, and there he has a son by the name Babruvana, who hasn't participated in the Kurukshetra war. Babruvana, he's very happy to see his father, and he comes out and he greets him and he says, "This kingdom is yours. You can do what you want." Arjuna there, he feels insulted. Not he doesn't feel insulted, but he starts telling Babruana, "What are you doing? You're like a female. You're supposed to challenge me. You're supposed to take the horse and challenge me. Why aren't you doing this, etc." So he is quite brash with his own son. Ulupi, who's the Naga princess, if you remember Arjuna's travels in the past, first he meets Ulupi at the lake where he's pulled down into the kingdom, and then he spends the night with Ulupi. That Ulupi comes in, comes and visits Babruana and instigates him to fight with Arjuna. She says, "He's challenged you. Now you have to fight." So now a great battle ensues between Babruana and Arjuna. Right? Finally, Babruana actually kills Arjuna. He kills Arjuna. Here, Chitrangada is quite distraught. She's upset with Ulupi. She says, "How can you come and ask my son to kill my fight with my husband?" And he's now killed him. Babruwana has fainted over there because he's killed his father. Immediately, Ulupi tells, "Don't worry about it. there is a reason for me for doing this. She finds a gem. She gets a gem. It appears in front of her, and she takes that and she places it on Arjuna's chest. And suddenly the dead Arjuna wakes up. And he's asking, what's happening? Why are you women here? Ulupi, why are you here? Istarangada, why are you here? What's happening with Babruana? And Babruana just wakes up there. And he's very surprised. He asks Babruana, what happened? Why am I on the floor? And he says, well, Ulupi will explain it. So Ulupi then explains the thing. She tells, look, when you killed Bhishma, or when you hurt Bhishma and Bhishma was on the bed of arrows, the Vasus, his brothers, if you remember, there were 8 Vasus when Ganga decided to help them. They were cursed. Ganga killed 7 of them at birth, and then the 8th one was Bhishma. So Bhishma is one of the Vasus. So those 7 Vasus, they were quite upset with Arjuna, and they cursed Arjuna to die at the hands of his son. What happens is, Ulupi's father, he comes to know of this, and he goes and pleads to the Vasus, and he tells them, please don't, please recant your curse, because Arjuna is Ulupi's husband. And he begs and pleads with them. So then what they say is, look, he'll be killed by Babruana, but Ulupi will be able to bring him back to life. But he has to die. Okay, that's the best we can do. So now that is why Ulupi actually encouraged Babruana to fight with Arjuna. Now they all are happy. Babruana invites Arjuna into the kingdom, but Arjuna says, "Look, I cannot. I have to follow the horse as per the rules. So, but what I would like you to do is, I would like you and Chitrangada and Ulupi to come to the ceremony, to the horse sacrifice at the end of this one." And he gives a certain date. He follows the horse around. Arjuna follows the horse around, and finally reaches Hastinapur. They're all very happy to see him, and I think I'll stop it here. We can finish the rest next. It may be another 1 or 2 classes before we conclude Mahabharata.